Afternoon. Hello. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the April 26th meeting of the Village of Pinehurst Historic Preservation Commission. The purpose of this commission is to approve certificates of appropriateness for new construction or major work, and to do so by conducting hearings and findings of fact when applications come before us. Our mission is to take no action except to preserve and approve that which is congruous with the special character of the Village of Pinehurst Historic District. My name is Bob Farron, and on my right, starting with Mark, I'll ask each of the commissioners to introduce themselves.
Mark Parson.
John Taylor.
Molly Gwynn.
Jim McChesney.
Tom Schroeder.
And in the middle, we have Alex Cameron, village planner, and Gwendy Hutchison as able assistant. We have a quorum, so we can proceed. This is a quasi-judicial hearing, so anyone desiring to testify must be sworn in, and we are required to consider only facts presented in this hearing. These proceedings are video recorded. We can review last month's, 2 months ago, our last meeting's minutes. If anyone has any questions or changes on those to bring up.
They look good to me. There's a typo, like a little, just a typo in in section 4, in the, let's see, 1, 2, 3, the fourth paragraph. That's not substantive. That's just a typo. Appropriateness.
I make a motion to approve.
I second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, we only have one case before us today. We'll spend what time is needed on that case, and then we'll spend a few minutes with some discussion regarding the findings of the update committee. So, Alex, if we can proceed with our first case after I swear you in. Alex, do you affirm that the testimony you shall give to the commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
All right, thank you. And our first case, Alex.
Our first and only item for public hearing today is COA 18-26, and this is a request to paint the existing brick home at 70 Page Road. And the color that's proposed is not in the Village of Pinehurst color palette, and this property can be identified as Moore County parcel ID number 000-21628. The applicant and the property owners are Paul Blake and Chuck Helbling, and I can attest the property's been properly posted and notices have been mailed to the adjacent owners.
Thank you. And who might be here to represent this? Please step forward. Mr. Blake, if you could want to have a seat there or at this microphone, since you'll be recorded. Do you affirm, Mr. Blake, that the testimony you shall give to the commission shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you.
Would you state your name for the record, please?
Paul Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Blake.
And what do you have anything to add to what we have, or Alex?
I would just like to enter into the record, there's paint samples that are coming from both ends of the tables. There's Aviatrix is the proposed color of the brick home. Within the application, the applicant had also marked a few other homes that they believe are similar colors existing in the local historic district. And within that listing with another paint sample, you'll see this labeled 285 Midland Road. That's a new construction that was previously approved by the HPC, and that color obviously is represented in that, so you can have that to gauge. We have the color palette here as well, and some of the other colors that were mentioned in the application for reference for similar colors. I can say that 80 Page Road, that was actually a staff approval for a Benjamin Moore Sag Harbor Gray, which is actually in the color palette. A lighter hue than what is being proposed, but it was in the color palette.
Alex, I'm curious, are these colors in the recommended trim color palette or not in the color palette at all?
The proposed colors are, as most colors can be, subjective, as it's not an actual sample that's in the color palette, but there are some that are, it would match close enough within the approved trim section, yes.
Comments or questions?
As to the trim, the trim color? White? White with black shutters, is that correct? Okay, thank you. So it would be that gray that you have indicated, white trim and black shutters? Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or a motion? Audience? Motion. Make a motion.
I move that we conclude that the proposed project, case number 18-26, if constructed according to approved plans, is not incongruous with the character of the Pinehurst Historic District based on the following findings of fact. This request is considered to be major work because it involves an item that was not approved by the village planner, and two, the proposed paint color is not appropriate to the building and district and is not in the Village of Pinehurst color palette. And therefore, that the Historic Preservation Commission issue a certificate of appropriateness approving the proposal as shown in the approved plans with the following exception, because we are making an exception for this color in your case.
Second.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. It's passed. One thing I did not, I overlooked, that I did not take care of was Alex's report on the normal maintenance. Thank you, Mr. Blake, from this past 3 months. Are there any questions? Have you reviewed those at all? Any questions, comments?
I actually did have a question about one of them, and that was the handicapped ramps on Ritter Road. I sure would like to see that, because that's, you know, that property's right in the thick of things, and I don't know quite how that's going to, I should have emailed you to ask to see it.
Sure, and I'll be glad to share. I have the folders here in front of me. There was, I will let you know that we went back and forth with the applicant for quite a bit of time, as there's an outreach group that's helping fund and provide the accessibility ramp for the homeowner. Zoning regulations, there were some implications with those where they originally wanted to place it, but it is on the side into the rear elevation, and it's
It's a
fairly
real-
lengthy based on the topography of the lot.
Exactly, because there's quite a grade there.
And they've also, the applicant indicated that the wood, and of course within its allowable dry time, will be painted to match the exterior of their home.
So will anything be visible from the street?
No. No.
All right. Very good. I'd like to enter into a discussion among the commissioners now regarding the update committee, for the guidelines update committee, their findings and what we have discussed a number of times in the last, the last meeting and the council meeting prior to that last meeting, the public hearing, that we heard a lot of comments regarding that. It would appear to me, well, first of all, from a procedural thing, that the update committee has presented its findings to the commission. We have not gone forward with anything presenting that as a whole. I believe it seems that we've, at least in my opinion, we've taken it, that was a big bite out of that apple at one time, if you could allow me to say that, but it seems like there's two separate issues that trying to address the entire thing as a whole, we might be here for a long, long time. It would seem logical to me to table the discussion, the portion of it regarding the district split at this time, and for any one of the commissioners that would be interested, any one or four that would be interested in spending a small amount of time, and sometime in the next month, to review the beginnings of what that committee set out to do, to update things that just administratively would address to help us continue to do business as we've done it in the past, without it getting to be a big committee thing that's going to go on for another 6 months.
Now, you're talking about the guidelines, correct?
For the guidelines. The district split would be tabled until such time as we get the guidelines where they need to be, and then perhaps address have further discussion on the district split at that time, if that makes sense to each of you.
Well, the problem there, as I think about it, is that the kind of the prologue or introduction to the guidelines is predicated on 3 districts. You know, and each district has being the state and having a special character. And so there's, you know, we've already got this language in the guidelines that addresses, you know, that includes the split of each district as part of the guidelines.
Microphone. What I understood you to say, correct me if I'm misspoken in it, just to make sure it gets recorded, the presentation from the consultants to the update committee is most of that is predicated on the district split. That's what I'm talking about as far as, so that those findings and that report have been completed from that committee. What I'm saying is, to be together to discuss the things outside of that update committee that's not predicated on the district split, but just for administratively for Alex and others to manage, and for us to manage and determine our path going forward.
And I like that idea. I'm just pointing out that.
It's true. I should have pointed that out.
What we should do then is we should then dispense with, like the first one, page and a half, and one of the appendix items that addresses the 3 distinct neighborhoods. And I'm sure other people have an opinion on this.
No, that makes sense. Could we use the version before the district stuff happened until then?
If that's what we
There's
as
a
a
version.
commission want to do. I'm just saying, you know,
Right.
that this now has been, you know, added to the document, so it's part of the document.
It's just so you know, that came at the very, very end of all that.
And I think there were 1 or 2 other technical changes we made along with that last revision too. But I think the idea is to put together a small group of us
Right.
who would sort the wheat from the chaff in that particular issue that was just brought up, so we could cut those words out
Yeah.
and then move forward with any, and clean up any technical issues that we see along the way.
Just speaking as one of the members that was on that rewrite committee, it was 2 years of, meetings, and I don't think I could take another 6 months of meetings.
No, that's my point.
And I'm just, and you will find, I think, at least with me, frustration that something's not being done soon, because that was a lot of effort.
Well, and Christine speaks for, a number of us who felt that we had a document ready to be approved.
Yeah, so.
To go
you
to
keep in mind
council
that
and be approved.
It's going to be frustrating having gone through 2 years to sit in another meeting with another group of people, and I think that weren't part of it. And, but that's just the way the process is, I guess, so I should just, I'll
So-
swallow my pride.
So there would be some that might say, we're just good to go and just continue
Yeah,
down the
I mean, we
path.
were there
you-
for 2 years doing that, yeah.
So it's all or nothing, in your opinion?
Do you
I
still
mean,
agree
I
with
think-
splitting it apart? I mean, that's my point.
Yes, I agree with it. I think that because that came at the very last part, and that is a controversial piece of the whole thing, but
I think that part might take a little longer to figure out what we're going to do with on that report. But meanwhile, we clearly got some guideline changes that we need along the way. So I think,
so like what, can you tell me exactly what items you think need to be, that were mentioned?
well, I mean, a lot of that stuff that you spent 2 years working on and in the guidelines were things that we all, my tail end of the meeting with the committee was that people kind of thought some of that stuff was needed in the guideline changes. There were needed changes to the guidelines. And I think with little effort, we can clean up, subtract
Yeah,
the split, clean up the language for that, and put in those things so that we can fix the guidelines before we
Yeah.
tackle the monster, which is the split.
let's just not rewrite the whole guidelines for another 2
No,
years.
no.
That's all I request.
And in
make
truth.
it,
and
let's
in-
give it a limited time. I'm sorry.
I agree. No, I
mean-
think you're right.
1 or 2 meetings.
Yeah.
And we're, because I mean,
I agree.
Going into another 2 years is
for
crazy.
the time that was spent on that.
I don't disagree.
And, yeah. so-
Well, I don't think that the language of the guidelines changed much with the addition of this, this introduction with the split district. I don't think that within, in the guidelines themselves, I don't think there's any reference.
Well,
Because the thought was that the guidelines would be administered, they would be, for each of the 3 districts, it would be administered in the same way, because each
Right.
district has a special character and is distinct and is unique. And so we would apply the guidelines, just the same ones,
right.
to each
right, yeah.
district.
But Molly, you were in, I don't think you were at the last meeting, and the one before that I missed, but there were comments about shoulds and woulds and musts and haves,
Ah,
and that was a completely redo, for those of us who sat in meetings discussing shoulds and woulds and musts and haves for 2 years, that is what there is some discussion of that you don't understand.
Okay, well,
That I missed.
and we can sit here and talk about that stuff all night, but I think if we get a small number, or all of us, however we want to do it, of us together, sift through that, come back one more time to this and decide what we want to present,
Yeah.
and get
Yeah.
the guideline changes moving. I think that's the frustration on my part, is that we're taking a more complex thing and holding up the guidelines, which we probably need some changes in, be it shoulds, musts, whatever it is. But get those moving so that we've got a solid set of guidelines to continue operation while we discuss further the split and what we're going to do with that, and how we're going to approach that. Even if at that point, if
Yeah.
we do or don't, let's say we did, for our sake of argument, we decide to go on with the split, then we may have to modify them again. But this isn't we got to have one document in guidelines that you can't modify, because it says at any time we can go
Yeah.
through and modify them.
I agree.
So
I agree.
just
I agree, yeah.
That aside
I
part.
just adding my,
frustration, and I understand.
We understand.
Is the decision, first of all, I agree with the premise that the 2 years of effort should get put into place. And it makes sense, I think, as Molly suggests, to strip out any language that may have been added at the last minute that would be contradictory to having call it the penultimate document approved. And I think a small group is better able to do that than a larger group.
In a timely manner.
Is it really up to us to decide what to do on districting, or is that at the council level at this point?
Well,
Put it on the shelf.
right now, my proposal would be to go ahead and let's just focus on the guidelines, and then once we got them fixed, go back and address your very question.
No, I agree, but
Yes.
We would inform the council that we have set aside, tabled the concept, any further discussion right now on the district split, just to clean the slate some. And
but my question is that decision still in our hands, now that it's actually been debated, at least, or raised initially at the council level?
if someone wants to bring it back up again on the commission as a motion, I would think,
Well, would we not make a recommendation to council? I mean, just as
Yeah.
we're going to present the guidelines to council with our recommendation
But-
that these are the guidelines?
if someone would,
Yes,
i-
that's what we decide to do.
if
That's
someone
exactly-
would make a motion that they wanted to present the district split as it was worded, we would vote on it, and then that would be the report, that would be the commission's position on the district split. And then it would go to P&Z or council.
And, I pointed out at the last meeting that the titles that were used for the districts clearly offended people and confused people. And so, I mean, to me, that was the main thing, was that they called it a school district and, and just by naming them District 1, 2, and 3 or whatever, and keeping it more, general, I think we would avoid a lot of mistakes that we had at that first meeting.
Well, that's true, but like I say, I would just as soon not spend
Okay.
energy even discussing it if we want to move forward with any kind of an update, tweaks, whatever. Alex, you have anything to add to that or coach us up on?
Just to reiterate and try to ease some concern, as for those over 2 years I was involved as well. I think the intent here from what's been shared from senior staff and what was kind of reiterated, Molly, in your absence with the last meeting, was that the HPC really prioritized now having a better working set of design guidelines to work off of for yourselves and for staff, and that this does not mean go page by page, go through anything.
Okay.
Again, it's
Thank you.
more housekeeping
Amen.
items. Obviously, first and foremost is to clear up some of the language relative to the historic district splitting and the numerous districts. I know I can speak on behalf of myself or staff. There's a couple of items that still give us a little heartburn as far as administrative level approvals that we would like to see addressed. Ultimately, it's not, of course, our call as it is the HPC's. But yeah, this is, as Bob and I have had a few meetings that to discuss where to go from here, is that let's meet once, maybe twice. Let's
Once.
have firm timeline, and we're not trying to reinvent that again.
And then bring it back here, and then the whole HPC would then have a cut at it. So it's not like we're trying to do something in a secret room and go do it. It's, again, go back to the working level for the guidelines. And all we're doing is prioritizing the guidelines. And then when and if we decide to, we can then pick back up the split again and move forward with that. But I think, my point of view, I think those guidelines at this point have languished way long enough that just need to get through and get straightened out so that we can keep functioning just like we are today.
I'll be the first to excuse me, Mark, go ahead.
No, when Alex mentioned heartburn, I know that Mike Newman has some difficulty with these standards and guidelines. And the council's going to ask for his opinion, and as far as I know, they've always adhered to his opinion. And instead of us kind of treading water, hoping that, maybe we go start with Mike.
Absolutely, and the district split was on Mike's behalf, so.
And I know
I
that
want to
Mike
correct
is-
that. I don't think it was on Mike's behalf. I think it was an action. Mike said that it was going to be an issue.
Yeah, maybe I spoke, Mike recommended that we discuss, we work on that language of neighborhood, and that's why this all came about.
That's correct, but he did not recommend a split.
No, he recommended we try and figure out how to deal with that.
Right.
Yep.
I agree. I just wanted to make sure
Yeah,
I
okay,
understood.
sorry, yeah.
Oh, that's okay. I just wanted to make sure I understood.
And even that would be not too difficult to go through and take out neighborhood and put in district, because the neighborhood, you know, arguing a case, an appeal on the basis of neighborhood was the problem Mike had with the guidelines. That's what I'm remembering.
Our current guidelines have neighborhood, and we're already using that, and we're surviving, so we survived for a while.
Yeah, but we need to fix some of that so that we aren't across the breakers legally. And you're absolutely right. We are effectively still operating with a manual that says neighborhoods, and we shouldn't be doing that. And that's the kind of thing and reason I think we ought to prioritize the manual so that we can continue to operate correctly in accordance with the law, and then take on the other portion of it. So it's just split the two in the middle and take on what I hear Bob saying, and I absolutely agree with, is the higher priority, which is the guidelines, so that we aren't cross the breakers somewhere or another. And there were, if I remember way back when, there was a bunch of technical stuff too that was typing roofing materials and so on that we wanted to change and that were in this new one that aren't in the old one. So make the changes to that, get us back up to ground zero, then we can address the split. Because that seems to be going to be taking some longer period of time, because there's more questions about that than I think about the guidelines. That's all the thought I have.
As for the minutes from the very beginning, for the rewrite,
Right, I haven't followed back up with, that came up in a conversation in that one, and we'll try to find time in between now and whomever can get together before our next commission meeting and review some of that. I haven't really gone back on that. So I'll be the first, Alex will be the second to volunteer. But if we could find, we'll set a time limit. We'll set a 1-hour time limit between now and our next commission meeting to discuss this as an update to the update committee. If I can find some people that would like to participate in that.
I think the idea of certainly a finite commitment, but I think that's going to imply that the people who have to do it are the people who are on the committee originally. I mean, I would be happy to participate, but I'm starting from ground zero. Christine is not. She can go right to the issues, or other people.
Well, Alex will be he's our counsel in it as well.
But it would be nice
And
to.
Christine, you're welcome. We'd love to have you.
Absolutely be there, yeah. And I think we should have a majority of people who did the rewrite there, so that, I don't know, that's asking me for another meeting, but.
You also
My
know-
opinion on that is no. I
You also know
mean,
where the speed bumps were, and you can.
Yeah, I guess.
I think part
the
of
makeup of that committee is, their task is complete. And their position is what we have. And I don't know that having that many people and doing that again will get anywhere closer
I think
to
that's
the
what
finish line.
operationally caused part of the length of time when you have so
I
many
respect
people.
all of them, and I
Yeah.
appreciate
So-
all the
so
work
maybe
each
Molly
one
and
of them
Jim, you
did.
guys could come to.
I didn't.
All of us.
But I do feel that on the committee, which will be small, you should have somebody who worked for the 2 years on the rewrite. And that would be Christine or me.
I'm happy to have any,
We could be all of us.
Have to have both of us, but
I have the
one
unique,
of us.
I have the unique perspective and position, which may be fate, that I wasn't on it. So I'm kind of a clean sheet of paper. So there you have it.
And then maybe the best is to have a mix of each.
Yeah,
Right.
I think so.
absolutely.
We'll think of it as in looking to a goal, an endpoint, but we'll do it 1 hour at a time. If it takes us 1 or 2 meetings in between regular commission meetings to do this.
I'll volunteer for it.
I also want to prayerfully consider it and email me later, and I'll do it. I've already prayed for it, so you're good. we will check our calendars from there. Certainly Alex and his calendar as far as getting a room scheduled and whoever we have that decide that they're willing to do it. I would appreciate any of you that want to do it and can do it. And is there anything else on that matter? Mark?
Just the, some of the problems I have with the document are the musts. And after the meeting that we had, the first one, that Mr. Baldry came up and he said, how many musts do we have to get rid of? And I said, you only need 2, must meet the PDO, and must be congruent. I mean, those are only, and I said that to Mike Newman, and he said, you're right. That's what it should be. And I think we should really just see what Mike says he's going to, let us do, instead of just saying, let's do this, and then it goes to him, and we've wasted all this time again, because they're going to listen to Mike. The council's going to listen to Mike.
Well, maybe we ought to invite him to our little group.
Well, I need to find out some protocol on how that would do, which I will do sometime next week and see how that, from a protocol procedural standpoint, because I have no clue.
Right.
What?
Intensity.
Well, please email me in the next 24 hours if you're willing to serve on, and if you're not, willing is probably not the right word. If you don't have time to serve on it, just send me some bullet points of things of concerns and things that we could fix. 100 words or less total, and we'll share those ideas with the group as we gather. Alex, what do we need to do procedurally? Does that have to be an announced public meeting?
Depending on how many members of the HPC, yes, but we'll
That's one of
handle that.
the things I need
Staff
to
will handle
be
that.
clear on.
Once you get a definitive number of participants, and then we work on availability and get something set, we'll make sure staff handles that the notice requirements are met.
Very good.
And obviously check, again, availability of meeting rooms.
Very good. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Any other new business?
Any other, well, I consider that was new business. So,
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
public
Okay.
comment.
All right.
I didn't know that was a public comment commission meeting. I mean, that wasn't part of the facts, but I'll be happy to listen to you for sure.
On the agenda.
On the agenda.
Comments of attendees.
Missed it on the agenda, excuse me.
Yep, I'm sorry. I just
No, you're right.
that out.
Please step forward.
state your name and address so we know for the record too, please.
You swear me in, Bob? I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Okay. My name is Jack Farrell. Quite honestly, I'm a little bit confused as to exactly what this subcommittee, I'll call it subcommittee, is supposed to accomplish. What's their deliverable? What's the topics? Because when I attended the council meeting on the rewrite, I heard 3 concerns. One was the names of the new districts, which I think is easily handled. The second being the fact that they were splitting it into 3 districts, and there was a lot of concern and misunderstanding as to why that occurred. And the third I heard, and you're right, Mark, was musts and shoulds. And, it's very close to me, my heart. But you may be able to solve the split district, and you may say, I'm going to abandon the splits for now. But I do believe you're correct that the musts and the shoulds are causing a great deal of concern on people who review it, and so I think that has to be addressed.
What we hope to do.
Is that going to be part of the subcommittee, or is it going to be just related to the split?
No, the split is tabled for now.
Okay, so the subcommittee,
that
let
part
me
of it.
paraphrase, because I clearly didn't understand.
I'm sorry.
So the subcommittee is not going to concern itself with the split or the naming. It's going to concern itself with what changes and/or issues should the as-written guidelines, the second draft, third draft, whatever, the draft before the split, can they be resubmitted to the council for approval? I mean, is that the net of the whole thing?
Yeah,
Yes.
that there's a need for an update to the guidelines regardless of whether there is a split or not. That is in some sense a separate issue.
Okay, so in other words, are the final guidelines, are they appropriate to bring forward once again? Is that correct?
I think the issue that I hear, and I did miss a meeting, and I didn't, so I was unaware of this, but the issue is that Mark and perhaps others feel that there are too many musts, and that the village attorney, the council attorney, would never argue the case,
Right.
would feel that it was unwinnable. So I think it's the musts and the shoulds are going to be under discussion in the special committee.
Okay.
But only as they pertain to the guidelines.
Okay, I'll be happy to send you my issues or concerns or
Please do.
solutions, quote, solution to that particular issue, so
Okay.
I'd be happy to do that.
Jack,
Yes,
is it your understanding that we were originally assigned the onerous task of rewriting to a new set of guidelines? In other words, this division of the historic district and so on, to my way of thinking, is what really muddied the water. And
I'm not 100% convinced of that. I think that the new guidelines can and should apply to however many and all the districts that you create, because as you know, we reviewed, 20-some municipalities, many of which had multiple districts, and almost all, without exception, had one set of guidelines that applied to all the districts. As a
I would
matter
say
of
they
fact,
must apply to all the whole
said
district.
they applied
I
to.
mean, that would be a must, that they
No,
apply
I
to
said
the
they
entire
apply
district.
to all the districts.
Right.
And then they reference the special character, which is described in either a separate document or the beginning of that document, the special character of the particular district that's under concern when the commission meets. Similar to what you would do here if you had three districts would be that there is a description of the, quote, school district, its special character, as there is of the other two districts. And the guidelines would only reference special character, not necessarily within the guideline itself, talk about what the special character is. That's in a separate section. So anyway, I'm getting off the case here. But anyway, so I'd be happy to send you my recommendations on that. So
Great. Thank you.
John Strickland. I like what's happening. I followed the process. The time has come to move this along. I think you've come up with a way to do that. And I'm not arguing against taking action today or in the near future, but hopefully you will, on the districting. But I'm just curious, the confusion that arose at the council meeting a month ago about the districts had a lot to do with the names, and that can be changed, as I think Jack had just said, and you all agree. Is there some predisposition, though, among you in general about the district idea, which seemed to be required by comments from the village attorney? So I'm confused as to why, at least at this level, there's any issue about proceeding with the district idea
I think
itself.
I can speak for myself, and that is simply the fact that I don't want to word this right because I don't want to offend anybody. It was a big apple that we took a chunk out of, and the apple may have been just a little too big, so we're splitting the apple and making it a little bit smaller into workable pieces. And I know I have no predisposition of what will or won't happen with the three districts. I'm just setting that aside now so we can go back, do what we need to do with the guidelines.
Right.
So that we can continue to function
Right.
appropriately. And there are
Right.
some changes to those guidelines that
Yeah.
need to be made, and hashing them all over here isn't going to solve that. So just a small working group to put some changes in that we need to do so that we then got time to breathe and go back and take the other part of the apple. I'm not saying it's the first part. I mean, we just tried to split it in two. I'm not predisposed to anything on that. That may be the right way to go. It may not be the right way to go. And I'm not speaking for anybody else either, but I can tell you that's clearly mine
Yeah.
I just,
Well, getting the guidelines into place, and at least in my opinion, as close to what they are today, I think is really important, as you said, to proceed and have a basis to work from. I just think the part of that's going to have to be splitting the district if we're hearing from the village attorney, so I hope that'll get done quickly. Then you have a
And
lot
they may
better
follow
product.
each one after the other, but that's my point. Make the apple smaller.
The other,
Well, my
Guidance?
sense, and I'm coming to this a little bit secondhand, I mean, I was one with Christine who worked diligently
Yeah.
on this rewrite and went through all the different musts and shoulds. And what I'm hearing now is that Mark, for example, feels that we don't need all those individual musts, that one overarching must would be sufficient. So this is, like a new approach. And we'll see how we can work that out.
right. But do you agree that the districts are ultimately going to be a requirement, I think, in some way to make the system work according to what the village attorney has said? No?
Well,
Maybe not if the wording
don't-
is.
I don't have that sense.
Okay,
The thing I would want to make certain we do, and I believe we will, when we do the updates, that those updates will apply whether we split the district or not. They will continue to be in place. Now, should the district be split, we wouldn't have to, those updates that would, as Jack said, would apply to each of the individual districts regardless.
Right.
So it's not like we're going to reinvent that again, should we go down the path of the district split.
It was, my opinion, when we started this, that the whole point was to add, to crystallize what we are looking for, and sort of so that people don't get confused, like, after they've designed a whole building and say, what, you don't like the idea of 4-car garage facing a street, just to be, specifically the new construction, really, to let people know this is what we're looking for, so that we can have a smoother process, because there are just some holes in the current.
right.
And that's, in my opinion, the main reason, and then the districts came, from Mike, but the main reason was just so that we have a little bit more teeth when we make a decision, and people aren't trying to read our minds, that it's clearer for them. And I think the document does that, the new document does that better than the current document.
Right,
Yeah.
agreed.
well, we were throughout, we were concerned about the look of neighborhoods, and that a new construction would be compatible, congruous, if you will, with the neighborhood. And then, as you begin to think about that, you realize, well, we've got some pretty distinct neighborhoods here. So arguing, it's all about the context. And we were trying to be specific about that. If it comes down to just arguing for congruity within the broader district, as it now stands, we'll see.
That's fine. Thank you, Bob. Thanks very much.
Clark Campbell. On the district issue, one of the things I think you have to be aware of or be alert to is we heard that the names was an issue. I think the biggest complaint we heard was people didn't know about it. And here we are talking about it again in a public hearing, I get that, but no one knows about this one either. So I think you just need to be careful, and if we're going to talk about it, do it in a forum when everybody's given that opportunity to come and talk about it. I want to give you a little historical perspective. I had the honor of being on council and on the rewrite committee when it was conceived, and it was going to be maybe a 3-month task, and we're well past 27 months. So the perspective I give is council didn't ask for a rewrite. Christine just summed it up perfectly. There's holes in the existing guidelines. What we asked for was, we kept hearing about these holes, we kept hearing about these holes, and we kept hearing about it even before my time on council. And that was what we asked. Leadership took it to a full-blown rewrite. So that's how we are. I want you to understand that perspective, because now that you're crystallizing it and you're getting down to a smaller committee to take it for you guys to give advice, I think you need to know that perspective, because if I asked right now for someone from the rewrite committee to tell me what the new one does as far as filling the holes, I don't think I'd get an answer, not a good one, not a fast one, because I asked the former chairman and I never could get an answer. And the districts, the only reason they were created is the issue of neighborhood. That's it. It wasn't to protect the school district. It wasn't anything else you're hearing. When we got down to it, and the former chairman was beholden to neighborhood test, no neighborhood test, neighborhood test. It became, he just said, then we need more districts. We basically need smaller areas to kind of use the guidelines in. That's the reason for the conversation to come up to splitting it. No other reason. So if you're going to drop the word neighborhood, it seems to me you drop the need for a discussion about more districts. And no one can seem to answer the question for me, what could be built tomorrow that couldn't be built today if you had 3 new districts? Because I can go into my school district that I live in, call it whatever you want to call it, and you're going to have big, small, all the things that created the issue.
Mark, I think you make a really good point, because I was thinking about that. Having these small meetings doesn't accomplish what we really need to do, which is to educate the public on it and have more meetings. What would you recommend as someone who is on the board that we do?
Well, you know, I don't know, and I'd love to be part of your smaller group, but I don't want to grow the group either, and I have my own distinct perspective. I had a conversation with Jim McChesney over the weekend, and it's always nice to talk to Jim, but I hope everybody realizes that it's a good cause, and everybody, I think, embraces the historic preservation. It's just we may have differing opinions on how to get there and how to preserve. And the proposed guidelines are just beyond overregulation. And before I answer your question, Christine, I wanted to just talk on, because the older I get, I'll lose my focus and forget what I wanted to say. But the whole must and the overarching must, and this isn't Mike, Mike Newman definitely has a say in this because he's the council's attorney, the village attorney, but you have to understand, if you read the statute, it's simple. Congruity in the district, or something that prevents something from being incongruous with the district, if you want to be specific. That's not hard. The guidelines, if they're done properly, are to help you guide against incongruity, not create what you want it to be. The reason we have this unique, cool, historic downtown and eclectic and different is because there weren't any rules. If you built them today with our guidelines and our PDO, we wouldn't have the downtown we have. So I think and I'm not saying this is a simple task. It's not a simple task. But the test of incongruity is fairly simple. It's not, and I'm not saying because there's a laundromat in the historic district that somebody can build another laundromat. We have other prohibitions, but just theoretically, that doesn't make it congruous because there's one. It's a test that you have to, and it's hard to put into words. But congruity is a tough one, but creating a multitude of musts mixed in with shoulds, and we had this conversation. When I was on that I didn't see a light at the end of the tunnel, and maybe there is one, which is why I sort of stepped out of the rewrite committee, there was none. And I did have, to your point, Molly, I did have conversations with the leadership at the time, and they weren't going to back off the musts and the shoulds in the neighborhood. They just weren't. Well, here we are, we're going to back off them again because you have to. I mean, you can't create something that's just going to violate state law. So as far as notification and how you get people out there, when I sat in that meeting and heard people upset, most things they were upset about was not knowing about the meeting. I mean, I sat there for 4 years, and a good portion of my 4 years I heard about how we did everything in the dark. I don't know how you I don't know if you put an envelope in the mail and make sure that they return receipt requested. I don't know what you do to get people to understand you're having a meeting and talking about the districts. I think the districts dies on the vine. I think it's ill-conceived. I don't think that the people that suggested it even want it. They'd have to say that publicly. I think that if you're going to have one set of guidelines and you're going to do a district test, if you're going to do anything, shrink the district. I mean, I'm not saying we do that, but that's where the theoretical conversation goes. Splitting it up, if you really want to control huge and small, that's where this all started a few years ago, huge and small. Well, Mr. Dedman's house is pretty darn big, right next to some pretty small houses. I think it's cool. I mean, I just love our little history. It's eclectic. It's neat. I'm not suggesting someone go out and build a 10,000 square foot house next to mine at all, but historically speaking, what's there is neat. But I would say that you'd almost have to have a historic district per road. I mean, you can't draw these lines. I don't think this conversation on districts, based on the public's reaction, I think that it dies. If you look at it from a standpoint of congruity is the test in the district, there's no, and again, the reason for the splitting was neighborhood.
Right.
These districts are still too big to say that you're going to avoid what you wanted to avoid. It's happening right now on Everett Road. It's happening. It's a beautiful home, but it's huge.
That's the reason we put the splitting the districts, again, it's tabled.
I know, but my point is it should be tabled
Well,
under the table, deep six.
And you may be absolutely
So-
right, and that's, I think, why I thought it was a good idea to split it off, because we know there's some things we got to fix in those guidelines. Whatever that is, however that is.
Well, I just wanted to give you
So
the
we can
perspective of
continue.
why it was created. It was
Thank you.
created for the
Well-
word neighborhood. If you remove the word neighborhood, you don't need to have the need any longer.
Clark, you need to keep in mind that one of the reasons it was, as someone sitting behind this table who's had to make decisions and in my mind, I know a 4-car, I keep going back to that one, but a 4-car garage that has minimal facade is not appropriate to the district. But Mike Newman, we were almost sued for that, and we could have lost that suit. And so it's hard as someone behind this table without better defined guidelines to feel confident about making a decision, not being blamed for it.
I'm not saying that you shouldn't look at the guidelines. I didn't say that. I'm just saying I want you to have the full perspective of that it's a congruity test. When you create the
Right.
guidelines, whatever you create, but must is not really a guideline.
Yeah, there's not that many musts, though. I think that there's, yeah,
87.
there are 87. All right, well,
okay, I'm not to cut you off, but
And you need to be on that small committee.
I will.
Thank you.
We will, again, get together if you let me know when you can do that over the next week or so. Are there any other comments from the audience? Yes, sir. And one thing I will say as he's coming up, regarding the public, their viewpoints at that meeting with the council of not having input, that's what we were doing. That was a meeting for input. There was no behind the scenes, there was no direction or anything else. That was a meeting for public input. There always has to be a first meeting for public input. But so many came with the understanding that all this was a done deal, and it wasn't.
And it's still not.
Still, obviously, yes, sir.
Well, John Root, live in Pinehurst, was in the first the first commission, and I guess I have a couple questions. One is, how many of y'all had training to do what you're supposed to be doing?
I first came on.
First came on, okay?
for the exact, yeah.
Mark,
We all came, well, we were
I
trained.
know
You're talking
Mark
about for
said-
the
talking
commission
about
or studied architecture?
No, as a commission member.
Yes.
We were all brought in with
Yes,
Jim and
we
trained.
all had training.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah.
recently.
Nothing like we had, though, John.
Okay. Well, I guess it sounds as though big and small, relative to the meeting, the very first meeting, it appeared to me as though it was a done deal, not as something that you were contemplating. Because a study had already been done and money had already been spent to do that survey, although not very much money. And in that result, has there ever been a inventory of the buildings that are in the quote districts?
Yes.
That was part of the
Yes.
study.
Address-wise or
Yes,
view-wise or
there's an
what?
inventory.
There's an inventory.
Total inventory.
Yeah.
And is the inventory included as in the guidelines appendix?
Uh-huh.
So they're there,
As far as the lot number or the address, right?
Or
They
more
want- they-
specifically, Mr. Root, the county parcel ID, which is addresses can change, but the parcel ID will not. But there's a definitive moniker for each, yes. That helps.
Okay? But what the house looks like, or what the collection of the houses look like, you don't have. Is that correct?
I don't.
No.
I'm not sure your point.
No, well,
The whole
no, that
issue-
would be impossible. I mean,
What is your point? If you could, what is your point?
My point
I'm
is
trying to
that
understand and follow you.
this districting was attempt at trying to deal with big and small, correct?
Correct?
And old and new.
That was never said in the meeting or even any place else, other than this is the first time that I've heard somebody say, yes, that's what we were trying to do, or attempt to do it. But my question is, or my statement really is, that there are big and small in every one of the districts. So are you really solving, quote, a problem? And it's difficult for you to say by looking at an address and saying, oh, this is a big one and this is a small one. Now, is there things like that available? Yes. Or very shortly there will be.
Well, I will tell you, when we have certain projects that have question about them, Alex does a great job of calculating, looking in the vicinity and figuring out the square footages of the neighboring buildings and their uses. And, like, for instance, the Ford Garage, how many within that area have such things? And so that does happen on a case-by-case basis. Is that, yeah. So.
Well, it does. It
Well,
does. And we look at the properties and we look at the neighborhoods. We try to, do our due diligence on the cases that come before us. So, we're not just, we prepare ourselves.
Okay? For each individual case.
Yes.
Right now, we're talking about splitting the, quote,
We're-
district into
Sir,
three.
we're not talking about splitting the district. I've stated
Tabled
that's tabled.
Oh,
And
that's
we'll be
tabled.
happy to invite you back and we can
Okay.
do that, but it's tabled.
Okay, so the discussion now is about what?
The guidelines.
New guidelines.
Oh, nothing, okay.
Right, nothing.
The guidelines, okay. Well, if you want pictures of all the buildings,
Right.
then that's close to being done.
If we decide to, once we
Right, thank
bring
you.
that back on the table, then perhaps we'll do that.
That would be nice. And actually, the guidelines could use a few more existing photos of houses, I think. Yeah, so-
Well, I don't know, as you want to spend your time taking photos when they're already been
Right,
taken.
yeah.
That's
That's
the
what I'm
reason
saying.
it'd be nice to have that
Yeah.
resource. Thank you.
They're all at the archives.
Thank you very much.
Can I add one more thing? I promise I'll stop talking. That the other main thing about when we rewrote this was to modernize it for the web, and that the current guidelines and the order and the structure of it, it's really hard when you're looking at, like, I want to add a new house. Where do I go? The new titles of each chapter make it much easier for someone online. And some of the websites, towns that we looked at had this, where it said, I'm looking for a new garage. Click. That's where I go. That's the title of that chapter. Instead of weeding through a whole, complicated guidelines, that was sort of the impetus for rewriting it. Just, I needed to
Very
have
good.
that.
That's good information. That's the first
And I
I've
just
heard that.
want to make a quick one thing, and I think this comment period has very much showed exactly the point I was trying to make about the fact that tabling the split, there's a lot of concern about the split, and that needs more looking. But I don't want to table these guidelines any longer while we do that detailed look at that split. That's the whole purpose of splitting this in two, set aside for right now, they're just tabled. They aren't approved, disapproved, we haven't decided what we're going to do with them at all, but go back to look at the guidelines, which we need to do our day-to-day business. Our month-to-month business is the guidelines. And we've known we operating with guidelines that have holes in them. We've been told that. And
Yes,
that's what we need to get fixed, so that we can't just stop what we're doing while we address all this other stuff. We
That will-
got to
that
come
will-
back and look
that-
at these guidelines, and there's
Yeah.
there's discussion on that, and I really appreciate the comments on the guidelines. But the point is, we got to get these things fixed, and then we'll go back with plenty of public input on the split. But the
That will
split
be-
right now is, I think,
Going in a circle now.
That will be our mission, and then we'll figure out strategically how the council needs to inform the public that is tabled for the time being, that the district split. Yes, sir, John.
John Hoffman, Everett Road. I want to make I believe, a correction. It's not big and small. It's demolition and infill. That is the problem that our area, which I prefer to call Old Town, faces.
Okay, that's a good
We're
point.
not the school district. This is part of Old Town. And it's probably the only area in Pinehurst that is going to suffer from this infill demolition tactic. Now, you can't prevent demolitions, but by using the neighborhood concept, we are able to minimize the infill. Yes, there's a 5,000 square foot home on Everett Road now. There was also one built on the corner of Everett Road and Fields Road. But there is not an 8,000 square foot house, which we all remember was contemplated. In fact, they had to go to court. So what we're trying to do is prevent a random infill demolition problem in our area. No one's going to go and demolish the mansions over on the big hill there. Nobody's going to be doing that. We realize that. They may be doing a renovation. We'd like to see renovation work. But unfortunately, although you do get occasional renovation, the idea for many of these builders, et cetera, is demolition and put in maybe it's a mini McMansion. And basically, I believe a lot of it will be rentals, which is another problem that we have.
Thank you.
Rental will destroy the fabric of Old Town Pinehurst. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Any further comment? Motion?
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you all.
folks.
Thank you for your input.